Okay, we're going to begin this story. It's all about the Renault 4L, or 4L as it's generally called. The Renault 4L is 60. It's now the year 2021, and much water has gone under the bridge since 1961. I was working in the advertising department of the Boston Standard newspaper in 1961. My immediate boss, Roy Webley, was assistant advertisement manager and had come to Boston not long before I started at the newspaper after leaving Boston Grammar School in 1960. Roy had come from Gloucestershire and had worked in newspapers all his life. He was a good salesman, knew all there was to know about advertising, and had breathed new life into the Lincolnshire Standard newspaper group. Head office was at Boston, where the management had all their offices, and below stairs were the machine room with the huge Goss rotary press. Further back was the entire works, where dozens of staff worked in their various departments to produce the 4 or 5 weekly newspapers for Boston, Skegness, Louth and Sleaford. There was a large commercial printing department even further back in that maze of buildings. One of the new ideas being introduced to our advertising business clients was the advert feature, where if they could pay for a substantial chunk of advertising space on their own, or with ads from their associate companies or support companies in the case of a development, we would then put this with 1 or 2 good photographs and editorial, making the whole thing more readable and worthwhile for all concerned. Pete Taylor from Taylor's Garage at Stickford, the local Renault agent, had come to see us about the exciting new car about to be launched by the French Renault company. The car was to be a first in many ways: utility, versatile, family-sized, functional and inexpensive. In all, far different from the run-of-the-mill cars we were still seeing produced by the UK manufacturers. Roy himself drove an Austin A40 Farina, okay in itself, but uninspiring except for a method of getting from A to B. I was lucky to go with Roy and view this new car. Pete took us on a drive to illustrate its capabilities. We shot off down the road and then onto the verge at fairly high speed of about 50 mph. It made no difference. The car had suspension unheard of in the UK, torsion bars that soaked up all the highs and lows, bumps and hollows. Arriving back at the garage, Pete took out the rear seats as quickly as a couple of nuts and bolts would allow. With the natty lift-up rear door, this left a load area far bigger than any UK car could offer, no matter how expensive the model. We were sold, and returned to base to begin putting together something worthy of the product. The whole campaign was a big success, and helped to put Taylor's Garage at Stickford well and truly on the map. Pete's decision to go for Renault and their natty new model was to set the seal for the future of his company. Looking at the Renault 4L and our family brings us to New Bolingbroke in about 1974. We were developing our family transport business, and I was engaged in carting straw and hay into small farms in South Wales. We'd bought a second-hand 4L, white in colour, and well suited for Ruth and her needs. I cannot remember who supplied the car, but well remember being chastised for not paying sufficient notice to Ruth when she told me there was a funny noise from the back of the car somewhere. I suppose I was lucky I was somewhere in South Wales when the actual incident happened. Ruth had set off for a trip to Lincoln, our county town. With her were her cousin Nicola and our daughter Helen. Helen and any other children taken on trips in that car loved to ride in the back, right behind the rear seats. They would sit on whatever they chose and wriggle around looking front and back and perhaps making faces at the motorists coming up behind, just as kids do, or used to. No seatbelt law. In fact, only front seatbelts existed, and nothing compulsory yet. Well, the journey was going along nicely, evidently, until that funny noise started again. Somewhere near Metheringham, on the back road to Lincoln, it quickly became louder, and then quite suddenly, so I've been told, a wheel sped past the car and disappeared into the distance to the front. There was a bump, and the rear of the car sat down on one corner. Ruth and Nicola had to get Nicola's uncle from Lincoln to come and rescue them, and I asked our local mechanic from New Bolingbroke, Terry Pine, to recover the car and put it right in my absence. Strong words from Ruth, hurled in my direction, almost melted the telephone I was using from a client in Wales that evening. The next Renault 4L we had was a few years later. It replaced a lovely older Volkswagen Transporter Mark I that brother-in-law Michael and his friend Paul had wrecked one frosty night near Mablethorpe. The VW was my first transport vehicle for the new business, and I had fond memories of that excellent truck. We bought a 4L van in factory blue, again very second-hand, but a good buy. Behind the driver and passenger seats was a spacious load area with access from wide side-opening rear door. There was something extra that only the 4L van had, and this was a little flap above the back door. Lifting this up gave extra load height so large items could be put into the van to full internal roof height. It was useful too for long bits and pieces that could sit down into the van and poke out skywards. This is a van in a story called Paul and the Tyre, where Michael had to go into the fens in Cambridgeshire and rescue a lorry tyre that had bounced off the rear of Paul's lorry one afternoon. Michael at that time was our mechanic, is also my brother-in-law. This tyre had rolled across the lawn on some unsuspecting householder's garden, smashed his rear fence before dropping into a dyke behind the house. You can listen to this story elsewhere on this Buzzsprout site. The poor old 4L van sustained a very bent bonnet during the recovery of that tyre, and Michael was dispatched the next day to find a replacement bonnet from a scrapyard in King's Lynn. A couple of years later, our business had changed somewhat, and we were distributing new tyres for the Unioil company throughout Lincolnshire and parts of Norfolk and Cambridge. My sister Jane came from her home in Scunthorpe to help in our busy office from time to time. Once our tyre retail clients, namely Fawcett and Thorne, knew she was going back to Scunthorpe at the end of the day, they often phoned with extra orders of tyres for her to deliver on her way home. If the order was too much for her car, that same little versatile van was called on time and again. It so happened that one evening we had to remove the passenger seat, as the whole of the rear of the van was full to the roof. In place of the seat, we put a pile of van tyres with lorry inner tubes and flaps down the centre. In the top of all this was my nephew Richard, Jane's son, who had been with his mum in the office for the day. Fortunately, he was not very large and fitted into the top. Quite comfy for a little lad and quite an adventure. The front seat belt kept the pile of tyres firmly in place. Lastly, we come to 2021 and our present Renault 4L. This time it's a 1993 Savane, one of the last to be built, and we bought it from an old gentleman who lived near Brest in western France. It had been his only car for many years. He'd been the original owner and had had to give up driving due to problems with diabetes. We've had it 9 years now, and as you can see from the photographs in our slideshow, we make many demands on its versatility. Unbeatable as a local runabout and shopping car, or dogmobile, that rear low load area with uninterrupted access from the back seats folded is larger than even the biggest modern motor of any make. Throughout Europe today, there are internet websites, forums, repair info and specialist companies selling all the spares you need to keep this little marvel going. Long may it keep running. There we are, that's the end of that little story, brought to you by Cracker Books, written and read by Keith Sanders. On this Buzzsprout site there are over 100 other stories you can listen to, download them free of charge. There are free books to download also. Look at Cracker Books on Facebook for details, and there are also lots of free videos to watch on Keith Sanders, the Short Story Man, on YouTube. Thank you for listening.